Every day, thousands of people like you become eyewitnesses and meet with a sketch artist to describe the face of a suspect. In my last year at San Jose PD as a police artist, there were over 3,000 violent crimes reported in Silicon Valley, and I interviewed over 200 victims. That means that every year in the United States, we can expect around 4,000 interviews between sketch artists and eyewitnesses. Now, most eyewitnesses have a good idea of what to expect when they meet with an eyewitness, but many are unaware of how the sketch artists will actually process their evidence. You see, eyewitness memory is a type of trace evidence, like fingerprints left in a crime scene. And the composite sketch represents the tangible trace evidence for that investigation. While the importance of this trace evidence should not be underestimated, the interview techniques used by sketch artists to access eyewitness memory may be problematic, and no one seems to be scrutinizing it. The truth is, not all sketch artists interview eyewitnesses in the same manner. As a matter of fact, when I first started, there were two interview techniques, FBI and Macris. I call them standard methodology for FBI and advanced methodology for Macris. The standard methodology is based on the FBI Composite Art Course. This technique encourages sketch artists to meet with eyewitnesses and show them a series of reference images to stimulate memory recall, all without affecting their memory. The sketch artist then relies on the eyewitness to look through the facial catalog and find some features that resemble the suspect. He gathers those images and then combines them to create the composite sketch. Tom Macris, who was my mentor, developed what I called advanced methodology. He had been the police artist at San Jose since 1976. He had gone through the FBI Composite Art Course in the 1980s. By the time I apprenticed with Tom in 1992, he was well aware of the issues of memory contamination. He felt that showing eyewitnesses reference images at the start of the interview would interfere with the process of recalling the suspect's face. So he decided to interview the eyewitness first without showing any reference images while sketching, and then show reference images afterwards. Now, Tom didn't use the FBI facial catalog. He had a binder full of reference images. They were mugshots. And he would ask the eyewitness to look for 3 photos that reminded them of the suspect. He would use those images to refine and then complete the sketch. Thinking back in 1993, I attended the FBI Composite Art Course. That was part of my apprenticeship program. On my first day of class, the lead instructor made it a point of suggesting to the class that they meet with me during breaks and ask me questions about how we were interviewing people at San Jose. He praised Tom and I for our interview techniques and said they were far more advanced than anything he was about to teach us. In fact, he was right. Most of the training involved a lot of rudimentary exercises like sketching from the FBI facial catalog and taking turns being sketch artist and eyewitness. There was no comprehensive lecture about the malleability of human memory and no concern over asking leading questions to gather unreliable information. Between 1992 and 1995, as part of my apprenticeship program, I completed 1,500 composite sketches in the advanced methodology. In 1995, I was appointed the police artist. 14 months later, I interviewed a victim of a sexual assault. I interviewed her the way I'd done over 1,000 times before. And as she was looking through the catalog of reference images, the mugshots, she said she found a picture of a guy that was actually her suspect. After discussing this picture with her, she assured me it wasn't him. But this event left me doubting using reference images to create composite sketches. After the interview was over, I called Tom and asked him whether anything like this had ever happened before. And he said no. Looking back on my training, I remember sitting at a drafting table a few feet away while Tom was interviewing the victim. I would listen to the victim describe the suspect's face, and I was sketching along without any input. I had to rely on my perceptions of her descriptions of the suspect's face in order to complete the sketch. After the interview was over, Tom would offer me his critiques. Interestingly enough, many of my sketches look very similar to Tom's final composite sketch. Then it dawned on me. I'd already completed well over 500 of these apprentice sketches. Why not just continue the practice of not using reference images? It would mitigate the issue of contaminating eyewitness memory. So in the fall of 1996, I stopped utilizing the advanced methodology, and I started practicing my own technique. By now, I'd read about experiments that revealed that our memories were unreliable when tested. Experiments showed that interviewing an eyewitness a week after the event and then showing them misinformation at the time of recall reduces accuracy. The misinformation in this experiment was as benign as changing a stop sign to a yield sign. This is why I think sketch artists should treat eyewitness memory like fingerprints left in a crime scene. Think about this. When crime scene technicians dust for fingerprints, they have to be careful not to disturb the area. They're trained to lift only the fingerprints that are there. When they come across a partial print, they don't lift that print and then fill in the blank areas with their own lines. They must have some integrity about collecting those fingerprints for the investigation. Relying on an eyewitness to remember everything in great detail is problematic for all types of cases. Sketch artists should not depend on an eyewitness memory to be so accurate and then compound it further by asking leading questions. For years, police investigators have recorded their interviews with eyewitnesses, and they've done it for both eyewitness and suspects. It's part of the investigation and provides invaluable information to solve the case. This is why I think sketch artist interviews should be recorded so that the sketch interview will offer some important information about the investigation and also be available for training. Not only will these sketch interview recordings be valuable to the investigation, but also to the investigator as they, and for the sketch artist as they prepare for any courtroom testimony. Let me walk you through my interview technique I call compositure. I don't use any reference images, and I'm mindful of eyewitness memory. Imagine I'm going to interview a victim of a victim of a robbery. She's already spoken to police, and she's already told them that if she saw the suspect again, she would recognize him. I meet her at the lobby. I walk her over to the interview room, and I ask her to take a seat next to me. I ask her if she's okay. She says she's fine. She seems a little nervous, kind of like I am right now. Ah, there you are. Anyway, I give her my introduction. So imagine this. I'm going to ask you some general questions about the person's face. I'd like you to go ahead and answer to the best of your knowledge. Most people don't remember everything in great detail. However, a lot of folks tend to remember a lot of information, especially when they're here and they're focused on the questions. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. That's to help you to relax and help you to focus on the suspect's face. Then I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. I'm going to show you the sketch, and if we need to, we'll make some changes. Do you understand? She says yes. Her eyes are already closed. I ask her to take a couple of deep breaths, and we begin. Tell me about his race. Tell me about his age range. Tell me about his body build. Tell me about his face shape. Every question that I'm asking about the suspect's face, starting with the face shape and ending with the eyes, are open-ended. I'm establishing a rapport whereby I'm guiding her through her memory about what the suspect looks like, and she's recalling only what she remembers. We're about 15 minutes into the interview, and now she's describing the suspect's eyes. I'm getting a really good sense of what the suspect looks like. And now it's time to shift her recollection and place the suspect at the scene. I ask her to open her eyes, and I tell her the following. Now what I want you to do is I want you to tell me what happened. I want you to tell me what you were doing just prior to running into this guy, and then take me through the incident up until police get involved. As she starts to tell me, I'm listening for details about how close she got to the suspect, what she felt about him, and how much time they had together. I'm observing her body language, and I'm being mindful of her emotions as she tells me what happens. About 30 minutes have elapsed since we first started the interview, and so far, she's been recalling the suspect's face over and over and over again, all without looking at the sketch. Now it's time for her to go from recollection to recognition. I tell her the following. Now, I'm going to show you the sketch. When I show you the sketch, I don't need you to tell me whether the sketch looks like him or not. What I want you to do is just look at it. When you look at it for a few seconds, I'm going to ask you the same questions again, but this time you'll be looking at the sketch. As I ask you about each feature, I want you to tell me whether we're in the ballpark or you want me to make some changes. Do you understand? She says yes. I can feel the anticipation in the room building as I begin to turn my sketch over. This is the moment of truth, the culmination of all my efforts to bring some integrity to the interview process. My composite sketch represents my best perceptions of her descriptions. It'll be easy for her to be objective about the likeness of the sketch because she only described the features to me. She didn't select each one of them to be accurate from a catalog. Now, psychologists have found that when someone takes more than a few seconds to decide whether it's the person they remember, they're actually not using their recognition skills. They may be recreating the event instead. When somebody views my sketch for the first time, I'm expecting them to use their recognition skills. If I don't get a reaction within a few seconds, I know that they're not recognizing the sketch to be like their memory of the suspect. They actually may be trying to change some feature in the sketch, in their mind, to make him look similar. At this point in the interview, the changes should be very minimal, if any. When I ask the eyewitness whether the sketch resembles their memory of him, she should have confidence in gauging her satisfaction. How is it that Tom and I realize the deficiencies in using the standard methodology to come up with our own interview techniques, to offset memory contamination, and so many other sketch artists continue to use some form of this methodology in spite of the research to the contrary? We may never know. What we do know is that when you use reference images to simulate memory recall, and you ask leading questions, you create unreliable composite sketch evidence. What if forensic artists are wrong? The recent decision by the Department of Justice to forego funding for the National Commission on Forensic Sciences leaves it up to our law enforcement agencies to come up with their own best practices for our sketch artists. Even the 2009 seminal report on forensic science considers forensic art to be a footnote in their survey of forensic disciplines. Imagine that. Now, while it seems that forensic sciences may be looking past forensic art, it's only a matter of time, I think, before sketch artist interviews become a target of scrutiny by those reforming our criminal justice system. Today, we should insist that all sketch artist interviews be recorded so that experts in forensic art and psychologists can begin to work together and come up with their objective insights about the best practices for our sketch artists. At the minimum, we should allow experts in forensic art to offer their comprehensive analysis about the interview techniques used by our sketch artists working in our agencies today. If we encourage our sketch artists to honestly assess their interview practices, it can have a positive effect on all composite sketch evidence and benefit the thousands of eyewitnesses across this country as they meet with their sketch artists to describe the face of their suspect. Thank you.